Hello, Renata. Thanks for coming today.
Hello, thank you so much for having me over and for listening to my memories. Much appreciated.
If you can please state your name and spell it.
My name is Renata Sylvia Pienkawa, and it's spelled first name Renata, and my last name Pienkawa.
What is your age and where did you grow up?
I'm 65 years old. I grew up in Poland, in Gdansk, Poland. And I came to this country at the age about 20 with no English to New York City. So I definitely very much relate to all the immigrant stories.
If you could please state your current occupation.
So, this has been my life journey, being a teacher and being especially English as a second language teacher or teacher of English learners, that's called now, and it used to be called ELLs, now it's called ELs. So I'm an instructor, lecturer at Smith College in the School of Education and Child Study. And I teach teachers and also students like undergrads, so undergrads and graduate students, how to teach English learners. So presently I'm teaching a class at Smith. I have almost 30 students, and all my experiences of working first at Cracker Farm, at Wildwood, later in the high school, Amherst High School, and then later being a coordinator of the program for a few years, and also training teachers across the Commonwealth how to work with English learners, prepared me to teach this group of students. And what I wanted to add to what I said before, not to sound Pollyannish, because of course it was my early years of teaching. I was optimistic and excited. But even then, I was realizing that the students, in order to teach the whole child, you need to involve the whole community, the parents, the family, and of course all the teachers who work with the child, paraprofessionals. So together we were, of course, the nurse, the principal, the custodians, they were wonderful. Everybody, the lunch ladies, everybody's involved, right? And of course the family. And of course the families were going through their own post-traumatic stress, and sometimes they were able to come to events. Sometimes it was very difficult, but we were making an effort to make sure they have rides, they have ways to participate. Still, the amazing thing to me was that even though the children and the families were still going through so much stress and trauma, maybe for sure, actually, the children were so engaged and giving back so much affection and showed so much excitement about learning, about drawing, about all the different aspects of education. So that's something that I also convey to my students at Smith. And for example, one thing we talk about being a mandated reporter. Some of the new teachers feel like, oh yeah, I'm a mandated reporter, so let me report on this family, whatever family, if it's from where, Poland, Cambodia, El Salvador. But I always tell them that should be a big struggle inside yourself before you report. Talk to the classroom teacher, talk to the counselor. Don't take it lightly because there are cultural differences.
How did you learn English?
I lived in Queens, New York, and I wanted very much to go to college. So I took a very intensive class at Queens College for 6 credits, learning English. And then the next semester, I wasn't quite ready to go to college. So I was a nanny in Bedford, New York. And then the following year, I started college with a lot of English, but also a lot of dictionary work as well. I had to look up every other word that I was studying.
How did you get to Amherst?
Well, later in college, I met my husband, Arnie Rosenbach, and we traveled throughout the United States and decided to settle in Brattleboro, Vermont. But he wanted to go to college at that point. So we decided to move halfway between Brattleboro and Amherst for him to go to UMass. And then eventually he went to college to UMass, and I got my first job here in Amherst. And then eventually we moved to Amherst since we had children and wanted them to have the great Amherst schools for their education.
Where did you learn to teach?
So I learned to teach at Teachers College, Columbia University. After graduating from SUNY at Stony Brook, I went to Teachers College, Columbia University, and I was studying applied linguistics and teaching English to speakers of other languages. And I was going to use my skills in Poland, but my husband and I were in love. He was American, so we decided to stay together and leave New York, and, like I said, go to New England. So with that knowledge, we left New York City, New York State, and I started my professional adventures here in Hampshire County for the most part. Before I started teaching, I had other jobs like a waitress, or a tutor. But basically, my first job was at Cracker Farm School, working with lots of students from other countries, and many of them were Cambodian.
How are you involved with the Cambodian community?
I was the ESL teacher. Well, actually, at first, my title was ESL paraprofessional or ESL tutor. So it wasn't a fully professional position, even though I was finishing my master's at Columbia. And then when I went to Wildwood, a year and a half later, I got a professional position. But even at Cracker Farm, I pretty much was the independent ESL teacher of my students' grades K through 6. And that's how I first encountered the Cambodian students.
What was it like to teach Cambodian kids in those years before there was a Khmer TBE, Transitional Bilingual Education program, at Fort River starting in 1988?
Well, so we're talking about the period of when I entered the school district in March of 85, and then till the fall of 88 when there was a Cambodian program. By that point, I was at Wildwood, and we were starting a Mandarin Chinese program. That's another history. But let's go back to '85 when I first started. So imagine, a new young woman in her mid 20s. I never read many American or English books myself. I went straight to college after I had acquired English. So it was just, for me, a magical encounter. The students I had from Cambodia were very, I would say, they were cheerful. They had a sense of humor. They were very interested in learning English and improving their English, as did other ESL students. They also were motivated, wanted to learn, but the Cambodian students were, definitely very interested in learning all they could, like sponges, and they had their own little community. They knew each other across grades, so that was nice to see that the older ones were sort of protective over the younger ones. Also, it felt like the whole community of Amherst, which was new to me as well, was very involved. The churches were involved. There were sometimes, to parent-teacher conferences, there would be like an uncle or aunt that was an American from Amherst would come to support the family. It was difficult sometimes to get a translator, but even in English, I felt like there was support for the community, the Cambodian community. And the interesting thing was that the older students seemed to know some things about the history and Pol Pot and the genocide. And, they were, with a lot of emotion, they were explaining things to me. The younger ones were learning too, just like I was, about the history and the culture. So they were fascinated, like when we already had very like basic computers at that time, which was amazing. And we would do reading and writing. And we would research about, Cambodian history. They loved Angkor Wat. They always talked about it, and they loved the visuals and writing from memory, from what they knew, the older ones, and the younger ones, maybe researching and with them and learning and putting it in some kind of a format, like writing or also drawing. They were wonderful artists. I remember they used a lot of yellow and orange colors and beautiful, beautiful drawings of their country. It was very moving to see how much they were engaging with that piece. But also they were engaging with the American piece. They wanted to know more about the culture, the holidays, the ways of speaking, because many of them already had some English, but they needed to learn more idioms and academic vocabulary. And like I said, they were like sponges. So it was wonderful to work with them.
What kind of curriculums did you give to Cambodian students?
Definitely the curriculum was divided to dig deep into their own culture. So learn English, but through exploring their own culture and also embracing that, right? So we wanted them to feel grounded in their own culture, because research shows that you shouldn't pull away the culture of the students. You should embrace it. And that's when the students do better in every way, emotionally, mentally, academically. So we were embracing their culture And it was pretty, free flowing. Like at that point, in the 80s, we had a choice what curriculum to give them. So I was doing a lot of looking into their own culture in terms of, clothes and history and, emotions, the trauma they've been through. So we were really exploring their culture and their experience very deeply, and we would invite the elders to come and talk about the experience during our potlucks. We had at Wildwood School later. We used to have potlucks, and often family members would come and talk about their experience. I know that later on there was much more dance and much more, many more like arts explored. But even at that very early time, we did writing, we did exploration of history, we did some poetry, and we did drawings and paintings, even in ESL. Now, the other part of this was, of course, whatever the classroom was doing, whatever the teacher, the classroom teacher, whatever curriculum they had, whether it was, health or math, we would also bring that to the ESL classroom, which was mostly a pull-out classroom. So we were not, like I wasn't going as much helping them in the classroom, but pulling them out most of the time. We didn't have a classroom. We studied on a stage at Cracker Farm, and then later there was also we went to the library often, and the librarian helped us. So we would study what everybody else was studying. So, for example, what is healthy eating, right? So they had to learn that because maybe their diet was different from what was here, and they would think, oh, I can get ice cream, and that's a lot of protein, or a lot, it's good, it's milk. But of course they had to learn, the kind of good diet that the dietitians recommend. And sometimes in our society, with all the advertising, they wouldn't get that, right? So we had to teach about nutrition. We taught about animals, maybe the animals, that they would encounter here would be new to the families, like squirrels and bears, right, and foxes, and of course the seasons. We definitely worked on the four seasons and the changes. Went outside, collected leaves, talked about apples, went on field trips. So it was really a combination of embracing their culture, including this into the ESL curriculum, which wasn't like very strict. And through that, using vocabulary and grammar, like, for example, simple present tense and past tense, and, past continuous. And we would be practicing grammar, but talking about things that were relevant, both to their culture and to their new experience. But again, the younger ones often didn't know that much about their own culture. So we were learning that together and exploring that together. And everybody in the whole school, whether it was the librarian or the classroom teacher, was very interested in supporting them, and they knew what a huge journey it's been for the Cambodian people, and their long, beautiful, amazing history, and the tragedy and the genocide that happened. And we learned things that people mostly know now, but that people who wore glasses like myself, right, would be singled out to get killed in Cambodia. Then the stories with the boats and the refugee camps, all that came more through the older students and the adults around them. So I think on some level, you could see we were all very lucky to kind of encounter each other at that time, And both my students and myself as a young teacher, we were starting out in a very wonderful, supportive community. So I want to express gratitude to everyone who really who was there for the children, for the families, for a young teacher like myself. I mean, it was just, and I'm sure wasn't the perfect time, no time in history is, but there was a lot of uh, a lot of support that we all felt. So it was really wonderful. Physical movement was important to us too. They were young and I was still young, and we would go outside, play at the playground, play games. I know they loved go to music. So it was, the arts were being included, which is so crucial for any ESL student, and I think for Cambodian students in particular, it was very, very important. And the respect they had for teachers was just very touching, very touching.
What kind of challenges did the Cambodian students face from your perspective?
Very good question. Boy, I still remember most of the names, but I will not name anyone because out of respect, we don't know how much I could share and how much I shouldn't share. So I remember several students very distinctly, and I remember them all pretty well. But one student I had at Wildwood School came to us blind, and of course, this was very new for me. How do you, as an ESL teacher, how do you teach a child to speak English, read and write English, when you often base your lessons on pictures and also on objects, right, and field trips. So I was very lucky because this child got also a teacher for the blind. I think I can say her name, Hera Goodrich, and we partnered. So I was helping her with the ESL piece, and she was helping me with the blind piece. So I remember, the first lessons when I brought talking about apples, and apples and pumpkins, and using, going outside a lot, and using lots of objects. I remember I ordered. It was a time of more maybe generous accounts for ESL. Maybe it's the same now, I don't know, but I ordered all kinds of toys from Lakeshore magazine, and we were playing home and playing with trucks, and just really he was also a sponge, so it was wonderful to work with him. But the story, if this is true, now I can't be sure 100%, but the story is that had he have more intervention in the refugee camp, maybe his eyes would have been okay. But because he had an infection, they removed the eyes, the doctors there. And so that was what I knew. But is this exactly true? Who knows? He probably will know about this. So because the teacher of the blind passed away, so I don't know who would know. I think he will know. Okay, another student came in 6th grade, and we were used to having very well-behaved Cambodian students. They were well-behaved, they listened, they were helpful, but this student in particular was really going through some kind of a culture shock, and he was an example of a student with interrupted schooling, which we have now in the United States, many of. So we have, children who are soldiers, children who were born in refugee camps. So we have students who come, let's say, to high school and don't know multiplication table. So he was sort of that type of a student. He would be running in the classroom, hiding under the desk. And I had a wonderful paraprofessional, Janet Winternitz. Also, she's gone by now. She was a lot older than me, my mom's age. And I know she passed away recently. But she was so wonderful with him. And really, I was more of a kind of the general picture person, but she would be very patient to teach him the details of, learning how to read, learning how to write. So in 6th grade, he was catching up on a lot of this. And another teacher who was a reading teacher, who had specialty in phonics. And it was kind of sad because, whole language came into vogue. And they were thinking, oh, we don't need to teach them phonics. But teachers like Bobby Zajac really helped people, a child like this one I'm describing, because he needed a lot of explicit teaching. So explicit about your behavior, explicit about learning to read and write. So all those little steps were taken through me, through my paraprofessional Janet and other people. So that was another child I remember. Another one was in 1st grade. Some of the little ones who came later or who came as very little had also issues with literacy. And I remember this little girl, she was so exuberant. And she, this is normal to generalize. Like she thought that color meant yellow. So I would show her yellow and I'd say, what color is this? And she would say, yellow. And then I would show her blue. And I would ask, what color is this? And she would say, yellow. So I remember my son did that with dogs because every dog was Mona, because that was the dog of our friend. So for this little girl, everything was yellow, but she was so beautiful, so exuberant. And it was not just my teaching, but Ronnie Mish, also I'm just realizing, also gone by now. Ronnie Mish was her classroom teacher in 1st grade, and she was also wonderful with her. So the students had a whole team of people who were helping, those kids who needed the extra help. So special needs, teacher of the blind, paraprofessionals. We cannot underestimate the huge role of paraprofessionals, tutors who were helping the children. And even when the Cambodian program was at Fort River, like Seha would come sometimes to Wildwood or his wife to help us in parent-teacher conferences or in a few different situations. So we had just a few Cambodian students at Wildwood, but we did feel we had the support from the larger community at Fort River. One interesting story is we were with my older girls, we were talking, we talk about clothes and we talk about food and hunger in the world and different kinds of clothes and designing clothes. And one time, one of the girls who's beautiful, she thought that her child will be blue-eyed and blonde. And, and I was so sad because she was so gorgeous. But she was already internalizing some of the racism that's kind of better, And that was in her mind. I said, no, why? Look how beautiful you are. And look at you, your beautiful black hair. And of course, we don't know who the husband is going to be, right? So maybe he would be blonde or whatever, or a partner. There's so many different ways, right, to get a baby. But I remember, I recall that I made a mental note to teach them explicitly again not to, even though it was just sixth grade, not to take the advertising seriously and to really be proud. So that's some of the difficulties, some of the challenges. I wasn't an outreach worker, so I don't know what the situations were at home, but I also felt that that piece was happening, and whenever I needed help, I could reach out. And my boss, Debbie Zakarian, and her assistant, they're just so, everybody was so supportive. So I could really just focus on the teaching, and the students were so motivated. So let me think. In terms of the early years at Cracker, when we talked about coming to this country and or being in the refugee camp, I think the counselor were also aware, and they were talking to the students, and then I would get more their stories as poems, or stories about their lives. So wasn't as direct, but it was definitely very a powerful piece that existed. When I was teaching, I was very aware what the families must be going through. But they were dressed very nicely, clean, and very nicely groomed, which I know it's not easy as a parent, because when I was a mom later, I knew how hard it is to make put some food on the table, and also make sure your kids are well prepared for the school day. So I felt like they were definitely well prepared. However, sometimes, in terms of winter, I think they were learning also how to dress more warmly. I think that there were cases when, but older girls, like sixth grade, they often come in mini skirts, right? Little jacket, not mittens, hats, all the things that need to be worn. So I think that for the most part, that piece was really well taken care of. And again, besides the classroom teacher, they had counselors. They had at Wildwood later there was a therapeutic teacher. So we teachers had lots of support to make sure that the whole child is taken care of. And it was a very it was gratifying that we had the families were respectful, they were interested in learning, in their children to learn, and the whole community was very supportive.
I see you brought some stuff today. If you could just share us what you brought in.
So yes, so my first picture, can you see it over here? Okay, that's my students, mostly Cambodian students, and me in 1985 in front of Cracker Farm School. And like I told you, we loved going outside and learning outside. And then I have some students. You see, this child was in kindergarten, I believe. Then we have some foliage pictures, another student. This one was a little older, sixth grade. And oops, this is me with the sixth grader. We were exploring foliage outside, bringing all the beautiful symbols of fall. And then here's some decorations. We did have a Christmas tree and a snowman, Like I told you, we were always going between their culture and mainstream culture. We even won a Halloween contest. And that was so funny because the classroom teachers made beautiful kind of educational doors to decorate for Halloween. And I wanted to really do something scary, which was very scary to some of the students. So we had something really huge, kind of a mask, and we put sunflower seeds on the mask and painted it, and then sticking out gloves with blood. And, it was kind of very, very scary. But then there was noise coming, scary noise from our room that was at Wildwood. And the students and I had fun to really do something maybe not as tasteful and educational, but scary. So we got the first prize. Here's one of my pictures with my children, my students, in the fall of '88. So most of the Cambodian children were already at Fort River, but we still had some left at Wildwood. And you could see me next to the blind child. And then I also brought this. This is just to show you as an example that children at on the South Campus were studying about Cambodia. So I have this old booklet with poetry, stories, and perhaps the history teachers in your group will know about this.
That's my uncle's poem. You
Oh,
literally turned right to my uncle's poem.
It was meant to be, see? Could We Ever Forget by Kork. I feel restless. My thoughts keep going back to Cambodia, to when I was born into a farmer's life. How wonderful our country was then. Now I'm far away, so confused about my future, about living in another country and becoming a new citizen. To go through with it would mean goodbye forever. To be completely separated would be suffocating. It would make me so sad to change citizenship and abandon my nationality, because my heart is still full of love for my country. Cambodia is so beautiful. If we really appreciate it, maybe we would regret the reasons that made us leave our country. Maybe we shouldn't have given up and gone so far away. It's true, Cambodia is small, but how beautiful and picturesque. Everywhere you look, it's green and fresh. There is not a single place that's not lush and bountiful. Every month, every year, we lived by farming rice. We were poor. We always knew our work would produce a good harvest. I'm not telling lies. What I've said is all true. But later on, the bastards came and murdered their own people. They arrived pretending to be our leaders. They called themselves the ones who could be trusted. When I think of what they did, I always feel such anger. After eating rice gruel, they made us dig the earth without time to rest. They made Cambodia poor without even rice to eat. Every minute of every day, people died from overwork. Or they would accuse you of something, then kill you without a second thought. They would say we were soft, lacking endurance. They constantly tricked us. They were never straightforward, never honest, just talk. Without justification, they would call us traitors and take us away to be executed. Night and day, I was in a stupor. I could only think of death. I didn't know when they would come to get me. I always waited and listened for their next move. I'm so distraught. Even the very young and old were made to work. It didn't matter to them if you were old or crippled. according to their law, everyone would be treated equally. You must understand, these people were vindictive. They made us miserable. They terrified us. They tore us from our mothers and fathers. I'm telling this story out of a rage that never relents. How did it happen that Khmer killed Khmer? You must try to help me think this through. You must not forget. Remember always. Don't let what has happened just pass unnoticed by our brothers and sisters. Please write it down so it can be told. Excuse me if my words are wrong or out of place. Please, my Cambodian brothers, help me to correct the distasteful words in this poem. With my little education, I don't call myself a learned person. Therefore, my elders, help me with your knowledge to make this poem more praiseworthy. I won't mind if you have thoughts to add to mine. I won't say your words are good or not good. If you have more to add, that would be wonderful. I'm anxiously waiting. If you have advice, please send it to me. Please don't let your reticence keep you from doing this. Everyone, please write to me. Ok Kork.
Thank you so much. So, one of the last questions is, have you had other experiences with the Cambodian community?
So after 1988, when they started the Cambodian bilingual program at Fort River, I still would work with some Cambodian students at Wildwood occasionally, and also go to some of the events that they often had, wonderful events at Fort River School. The presence of the Cambodian community was definitely felt for any teacher, and especially ESL teacher in the district. Also, surprisingly, because I guess it was my next door neighbor, Betty and Lyle Craker, and they adopted a Cambodian daughter. So I knew a little bit of that story that maybe it would be interesting to follow up. So I have heard stories from them as well, and also there were workers in the school district who were Cambodian. So that connection also remained. And sometimes I was honored to be invited to an event, not just like singing and dancing, but also I went to a funeral place, things like that. Lastly, I was a coordinator of the ESL program at the end of my career in the Amherst public schools before I was working at Smith. And of course, occasionally I would have to look for a Khmer tutor for our students, because that was one of my roles, was to make sure that the students who need a translator or interpreter would have it in a native language. So that was the connections I had. In 2002, when Question 2 came about and we lost our bilingual programs to a large extent, we were very sad to say goodbye to some of the staff that supported our bilingual students in all the schools, including, of course, Fort River, But the teachers are very resourceful, so they found other ways to work with the Cambodian population. And I'm talking now about the elementary schools. So that's the story. And now I'm here in Amherst Media, and I met a wonderful young woman, Yana, who is teaching me now how to work with film in a community TV setting, and also your colleagues, Alexis and Jim. And I'm so grateful to be here, and grateful for the time, for this interview, and very honored to have been a tiny part of this project. Thank you.